Well, good evening, and welcome to session 2 of our 3-month practice period. Uh, Amazing times we're living in. There's incredible, huh? And really great to be here and see all of you. Um, I was thinking tonight to so last week I talked a little bit about kind of an introduction to Dogen's essay called Genjo Koan, the koan of everyday life, and mostly spent the time I had talking about the title. And uh, and I was thinking this week what I wanted to talk not about the Genjo Koan specifically, but to talk about meditation practice. I realized that there's I think a whole variety of levels of experience that people have about um, meditation, and whether you're beginning a practice or whether you've been sitting your entire life. I think that it can be useful uh, to go a little bit deeper and talk about meditation, about mostly as a way to deepen our sense of what it is, and to my hope for this practice period. I think one of the main things about this time is to intensify our meditation practice, our daily practice. And so I thought tonight uh, that would be a good way to spend our time. And then next week we'll go back to the Genjo Koan. And I think I sent out an email earlier this week with as was asked the topics for the next several weeks, and I'll try and keep up with that. And I did mention on there that tonight I'd be kind of the topic would be meditation. And maybe I think where I might want to start is there is another essay that that Zen teacher Dogen wrote uh, about about meditation. It's a piece that I think it's translated as instructions for meditation. In Japanese, it's called the Fukanza Zengi, and it's again. I'll send out. I can send out the whole document, but it starts. I love how it starts, uh, and right. So this is how he starts by this essay on instructions for meditation. He says, the way is basically perfect and all-pervading. How could it be contingent upon practice and realization? The Dharma vehicle is free and untrammeled. What need is there for concentrated effort? Indeed, the whole body is far beyond the world's dust. Who could believe in a means to brush it clean? It is never apart from one, right where one is. What is the use of going off here and there to practice, right? So he's making this statement that we are all, we're all perfect. We all, in some way, why practice when we are, that the way is perfect and all pervading. Uh, uh, the practice is and life is free and untrammeled. What need is there for concentrated effort? And this was, I think I mentioned this last week. This was one of Dogen's burning questions throughout his early life. Was why do we practice if the teachings say that we are perfect just as we are? then why practice? Why do we sit meditation? What's the deal? What's the aspiration? Well, he answers that in the next paragraph of this essay, where he starts the next paragraph with um, what I think of as my two favorite words in Zen, and yet, right? So after painting this beautiful picture of setting you up for complete, confidence, and to really, yeah, right, like we are perfect just as we are, and why do we need to practice? He says, and yet, and yet, if there is the slightest discrepancy, the way is as distant as heaven from earth. If the least like or dislike arises, the mind is lost in confusion. Suppose one gains pride in their understanding and inflates one's own sense of enlightenment, glimpsing the wisdom that runs through all things and attaining the way. Well, he says, even if you do this, you're just starting. You're just making the initial partial excursions, but still, you're a long way from finding real freedom. Um, and then he goes on to give some very practical instructions. He says, find a quiet room is suitable. Eat and drink moderately. Cast aside all involvements and cease all affairs. So at least, again, he's this advice is for people living, monastic lives. But if you take this for whether it's your 10 minutes or your 30-minute period of meditation, these are still good instructions. Cast off involvements and cease all affairs for whatever time you're doing your meditation practice. Do not think good or bad. Get rid of pros and cons. Let go of movements of conscious mind and the gauging and judging of thought and views. Forget about, he says, have no designs on becoming a Buddha, right? So let go of any idea of improvement or getting anything. And then he says, meditation has nothing ever to do with sitting or lying down. It just doesn't matter. And he gives some very detailed instructions for how to place the body, which I think are interesting, but I think are not so important for us. I think for us, however we sit is just fine. And then he says, once you've adjusted your posture, take a deep breath. Inhale and exhale. Rock your body right and left and settle into a steady, immovable sitting position. And then he gives some rather cryptic instructions, but they're quite beautiful and poetic and perhaps practical. He says, you should then think of not thinking. How do you think of not thinking, non-thinking, or beyond thinking? He says this is the essential art of meditation, of Zazen practice. And then he says, and these are also kind of my favorite lines from this piece. The Zazen I speak of is not learning meditation. It is simply the Dharma gate of repose and bliss, the practice realization of totally culminated enlightenment. It is the manifestation of ultimate reality. Traps and snares can never reach it. Once its heart is grasped, You are like a dragon gaining in the water, like a tiger taking to the mountains. For you must know that just this practice is manifesting itself, and all dullness and distraction are struck aside. And then he says, when you arise from sitting, move slowly and quietly, calmly and deliberately. And maybe that's enough of Dogen's instructions. Uh, and and again, I think they're meant, I think, to be very practical, and at the same time, his language and instructions are quite aspirational and poetic, especially his think not thinking. How do you think not thinking, non-thinking? Um, I think it's one of the great mysteries what he's saying, what he's actually saying there. But basically, one way to think of that, there's an expression of uh, opening the hand of thought. So whatever, so we're not in meditation attempting to stop our thinking, but the idea is to not grasp on to thinking, and again to see that our thoughts don't define us, and our thoughts don't even have to define our story or our reality. So there's this, I think, I think through meditation we can cultivate a different relationships with our thoughts and not be so caught. And wouldn't this is a very practical and useful practice, right? Because a lot of our thinking tends to be negative. A lot of our thinking tends to be judgmental, tends to be solidified. So one way to think about meditation practice is um, shifting our relationship with our thinking. So um, that's a bit of kind of the Dogen's description of meditation. But the part of it that I particularly like is to where he says, this practice, let go of any ideas that we might have about what meditation are going to be limiting, and instead just sit down and see what happens. And I also love his this confidence, this idea of uh, this sense of uh, repose and bliss, and that just this aspiration is itself a kind of awakening. And a way that I like to talk about this in slightly more practical terms, I think that one way to talk about meditation is that we are cultivating a body that feels safe, right? That I think it's very common for, in fact, this is part of our uh, the way that we have evolved. We've evolved to scan for threats, right? Uh, it's like one of my Google scientist friends says, we are descendants of the nervous apes. That that are we've evolved to be really good at looking for what can go wrong, looking for threats. And I think that's not only externally but internally. We're 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 it's really interesting to notice how often we're scanning for, am I okay? Am I okay? I don't want to make a mistake. I don't want to look bad. I don't want to say the wrong thing. All of that can be subtle or not so subtle. So we are cultivating, I think, the body and mind of noticing when we're scanning for threats, and again letting it go. and cultivating the body of safety. And second, I'd say that meditation is cultivating the body of not uh, not needing anything, the body of being satisfied. What does it feel like to not have a mindset of needing anything to be completely satisfied? Whatever's happening, even if we're sad, grieving, needy, whatever it is, to whatever that might be, to keep coming back to, I don't, I can find satisfaction right in the midst of whatever those things are. That I think of it as this radical self-reliance, that we don't need anything to feel satisfied. So we're cultivating the body of safety. We're cultivating the body of satisfaction. And we're cultivating a body that is profoundly connected, interconnected, right? That again, it's easy to feel separate from ourselves, from others, and oddly enough, somehow, I think we humans are we may be the only species on the planet that can somehow feel separate from nature or separate from life, and a lot of, I think, Western philosophy and Western education has been really brilliant, and I mean maybe the opposite of brilliant, at embedding in us that we're somehow not part of the natural world. And I think so. And now I can put on my my social change cap. That this is why I think that if we're going to solve these larger problems around, whether it's racial issues, political issues, climate change, violence, these practices, right? That becoming more and more familiar with cultivating a body of safety, a body of satisfaction, and a body of connection, I think is the a powerful way. May not, there's maybe many other ways into solving these issues. So this to me is the connecting the dots between this, this so-called navel gazing, right? These navel gazers, and this, why are we wasting our time on the cushion? Well, to me, this is the most useful way that one can spend our time if we want to solve these problems. So I'll get off my soapbox. Well, no, I won't. I like my soapbox. This is good. So, so maybe one other thing to say about meditation, practice, and the one other way that I talk about it is uh, I use the analogy of the three bricklayers analogy. You've probably heard this. It's just a funny little story that there's three bricklayers, and someone goes up to the first bricklayer and says, "What are you doing?" And he says, I'm just putting bricks on the wall." And he goes to the other bricklayer and he says, what are you doing?" And he says, I'm making a living. I'm doing this to make a living." And he goes to the third bricklayer and says, "What are you doing?" And the third bricklayer says, "I'm having a conversation with God, because we're building a temple. We're putting these bricks in to build a church or temple." And so I use this as a metaphor for meditation, in that I would say that we're doing all three things when we meditate. One, we're just paying attention to our bodies and breath and minds. It's like the first, we're just being present for what we're doing. And we're like the second bricklayer in that we have many intentions around that bring us to meditation, whether it's stress relief or wanting to be listen better or be a better leader or deal with our grief, whatever it may be. So we're like that second bricklayer in that we do have some intention. And the third is I guess more like what Dogen was portraying, that uh, we are cultivating a relationship with something greater than ourselves, right? We're going beyond the self. Um, and David, I see. Can you hold your can you hold? Like, so I think what I'd like to do is move us right into groups and then talk about your question. Is that okay, or did you have something more particular, something I should know about right now? You can unmute yourself.
Am I the only David? I
No,
didn't
no, I
ask.
was talking to. I'm sorry, David. I was talking to David Maxwell, who has his hand raised, I think. Or maybe you're just applauding. You're struggling, I can see, with unmuting yourself. It's just not meant to be. So I'm gonna, yeah, you're gonna go off and come back. So
No questions. Sorry.
okay, okay. So let's I'm gonna get us into breakouts right now, and what I want to suggest is that maybe uh, each person take say 3 minutes to talk about what is your meditation practice like? What do you what do you do when you meditate, and how uh, and how might these ideas and practices that I'm talking about from Dogen and that I introduced, um, how might you um, integrate those more into your own meditation practice? So I want to suggest 3-minute monologues each person, and I'll do timing and I can send out a message. So 3 minutes. How's your meditation practice going? How might you work more with your own meditation practice? And this is a bit unusual. It's not something that people often talk about, but I think it could be useful. And the other possible topic is whatever you want to talk about. There might be something that you're feeling or happening now, and it's fine to use the time to check in with your partner. So we'll do 3 minutes each, and then another couple of minutes of just back and forth, where you just talk about how was it to speak and listen, and then we'll come back. There may be one group of 3, and that's fine. You'll work it out, and then we'll come back and have an open discussion. So here we go. Breakout rooms. So remember to unmute yourselves when you get into your breakout rooms, and feel free, of course, to introduce if it's a person you don't know, please introduce yourselves. So here we go.